Imagine working all day, lifting weights, and when you come home exhausted, the only enjoyment you have in life is playing a virtual reality game. Years. Back then, nobody believed in such a reward. He admits that he was one of those people and was just having fun with the game while constantly asking for money and that the gate is closed. The leader responds that that's impossible and wonders what's happening. He begins to shout, ordering some of them to. They distract the creature by claiming the shield should be able to withstand the monster's attacks. The man carrying the shield attempts to speak, but his leader ignores him and commands him to do as he's told. The shield bearer positions himself in front of the creature, which raises its mace. The man, utterly overcome by fear, puts the shield up, but without a chance, he is crushed by the creature. His companions are terrified and begin to run. After the leader raises his mace again, the lifeless man can be seen on the ground. The strange creature takes the shield from the man with its fingers and, unexpectedly, puts it in its mouth. It begins chewing it as if it were nothing. They start saying that this is unbelievable. After all, it was. An epic-level shield user, Light, concludes that something is completely off, since the monster they came to face is of a lower level than everyone else. They can defeat it easily. He says this must be after an update, because before, it was a monster called the Hellfire Goat, and no player could beat it. The monster, trembling with fear, comes to the conclusion that this world is based on the initial version of the game. Light remembers that the protagonist is waiting outside and that maybe he can open the door. The leader begins to knock on the door desperately, begging Nu to open it, things like that. Ao says that all ended that day, remembering when someone asked his team to take a break while they were at their workplace, promising him that they will share the reward if he does. However, as expected, he receives no response. Annoyed, Light asks if the man, he can hear him and orders him to open the door immediately, but something quickly whizzes past his body. When Light looks back, he notices. He realizes that the monster is coming towards him, devastating all of his subordinates before hitting him as well. Once again, everyone is thrown far away, left, completely injured. Looking at the monster, Light comments that with such ridiculous physical strength, everyone will soon be annihilated. Opening the door, Ao asks if all that Light managed after so much boasting was that, telling him that he has no talent to be a leader. With a proud smile, our scammer observes the monster. Although nearly dying, the man still mentally insults him and confesses to himself that he will use the protagonist to escape. He begins calling out to his subordinates before they retreat. Endou trips the girl, telling her that it's not a good idea. With the girl on the floor, she notices that the door is closing. The protagonist watches the leader at that time. Light rushes towards the door, mentally begging to at least be able to get through. He suddenly starts screaming intensely as the door crushes his arm. The monster heads towards the leader, calling him a noisy brat. As he prepares to attack, he tells him that the boy is very irritating and that he will finish him off right there. Light looks back and sees the monster coming. Khan, as usual, asked if the rubble would be removed in the afternoon. After failing to find any jobs, he started working towards him. Suddenly, a large amount of blood splatters everywhere. Watching that terrifying scene unfold, the girl and the man who tried to stop, the protagonist wonders how they will fight such a monster as he picks up the sword from the ground. Endou states that the course of action they must take is quite obvious. Raising the sword, he remarks that even though Light was weak, at least he had a good sword, and that was enough for someone like him. The monster, once again, preparing his magic, he asks if the protagonist is so eager to die and delivers a powerful blow, sending fragments of stone flying in all directions. The protagonist appears above the monster, preparing to counterattack. With a smile, he asks the monster what it is talking about. In the blink of an eye, he manages to slice the monster into several pieces. The monster screams as its horns fall to the ground. Light's former subordinates look on. Terrified by his strength, he either intimidates the man or calmly asks for their opinions. Once again, our con artist tells them that he'll consider the bar if they pay him 10 million yen. The frightened girl stares at him, unsure if he's serious. Both the girl and her companion yell, asking if he is really asking for 10 million. He confirms that's exactly what he's asking, and that he'll only charge 1 million per person. Annoyed, they start arguing that it's impossible for someone to have that much money on hand, and that he's just trying to take advantage of the situation. Ao responds that if they don't have money, they'll have to pay him with their bodies. Part-time as a construction worker, stuck in a routine of hard work under the sun and constantly being reprimanded by his older colleagues, O suddenly receives a asking them if they want to die so young. Then, the hero tells them that they will work for him, handing over 90% of everything they earn. The girl screams, asking him to stop treating them like idiots, while his friend points out that even Light only charged 50%. As the monster rises up behind them, now, he comments that, apparently, there is nothing else they can do. The monster becomes even more furious and demands to know who dared to cut off his precious horns. He throws a big ball of fire, screaming that they should die 1,000 times over. The girl invokes a magical spell, attempting to protect herself. The protagonist jumps into the middle of the flames. They are both thrown back by the force of the impact. Endou lands softly in front of them and, with a smile, says that apparently they managed to escape, but questions how much longer their luck will last. With that, they both give up and say they will work for him, but beg him to save them. He begins to smile, pleased with the outcome. He remarks that they've apparently closed the deal, glancing at the monster and commenting that it's been a long time since the last time he defeated it. The enraged monster retorts that it doesn't recall being defeated by someone like him. Both subordinates begin to wonder what he's talking about, considering the Hell Goat should have been eliminated before anyone could defeat it. Without responding to them, Ao, determined, simply observes the monster. He recalls that he had defeated the monster once before the update. He admits that he heard from some sources, message on his cell phone from the Prophecy Online administration. Seeing that it was a message from the game, he wonders if he hadn't disabled that the Hellfire Goat was transformed into the Ember Goat. With a single movement of his sword, the protagonist manages to deflect the monster's attack. The monster stares at him, confused and unable to understand how he pulled it off. Both subordinates watch, wondering who Nu really is, since he was able to stop the monster with such ease. The protagonist admits to the monster that if its attack had landed, he surely would have died. However, the attacks aren't dangerous when you know the tricks. The monster keeps attacking, but he dodges and blocks everything with relative ease. The monster grows increasingly angry, wondering how it's possible, while the protagonist leaps behind it, brandishing his sword. No manages to strike the monster's eye, telling it that its attack patterns are exactly the same as in the game. As he backs away from the fight, his new subordinates notice that he is pushing the monster back. They begin to cheer him on, encouraged by their victory. Irritated, Nu tells them that they are too noisy, and one of his subordinates calls it frustrating. He calls it frustrating. Suddenly, a powerful attack whizzes past No, leaving him surprised as it slams his large body into the ground. The monster comments that the protagonist's dodging ability is admirable, but that it all ends here. Leaning his back against the wall, the player realizes that he is cornered. The Infernal Goat asks if cornering him was his plan from the beginning. Without answering his question, the monster asks him if he has any email notifications. The message congratulates him for reaching first place in the beta test, and mentions that the rewards would be deposited in last words with a smile. The protagonist simply orders the monster to drop dead, since he can't even land his attacks against him. Even more enraged, the monster declares that it will grant his wish as it summons flames around itself, opening its mouth to concentrate a massive core of energy. The subordinates begin to wonder what those black flames are. No explains that it's a flame that burns everything, capable of instantly killing even a level 99 player. It's an attack that incinerates the entire ground, leaving no escape route. This is the goat's ultimate attack, its last hope. Smiling with his eyes glowing a purple hue, he dismisses it as nothing. Ao mentions that he had been waiting for this moment while activating his rookie kick ability. He strikes the ground, adding only 50% strength, causing a massive flash to engulf the area where he was. The skill jumps towards the monster, explaining that while it's a powerful attack, it leaves the user completely defenseless, and furthermore, its mouth. It doesn't have the same strength compared to the rest of its body. Positioning himself on the roof to gain momentum, he says that, in other words, that level 1 strength is enough to keep it closed, stabbing the monster's mouth from top to bottom. The monster falls to the ground, desperately trying to open its mouth as the flames burn it from the inside. Exhausted from the battle, he explains that once the skill is activated, he can no longer stop it. With that, his account shows him smiling, and he asks if they really keep sending those scam emails, while saying he will verify the account. He looks at his cell phone and comments that there is nothing else the monster can do except feel the flames burning its entire body. He jumps back to create some distance while asking if the monster is able to withstand its own flames. A little further away, you can see the monster being charred by the very attack it unleashed. Observing the monster, Endou says his goodbyes, as the hellish goat finally opens its mouth. It only manages to let out a scream before its demise. After a short while, the monster was completely charred. The system notifies everyone that the unique boss, the Hellfire Goat, has been defeated, while the girl and boy can't believe that they are still alive. Observing the protagonist, they notice that he defeated the boss without even a scratch on him. The system congratulates him, announcing that he was the first to defeat a boss, only of its kind. He is then granted the title of First Killer. This leaves him a bit confused, since he doesn't recall anything like this from the game. This title would grant him a 50% more damage when facing a boss. Plus, as an extra reward, he gets to choose a sub-occupation. The system then asks him if he will choose a sub-occupation. Now, he answers yes. The system also explains that once the sub-occupation is decided, it can no longer be changed. With determination, he chooses the soulsmith occupation. Endou extends his arm, resolute in his choice. Suddenly, a great light surrounds his body. With a smile, he says that it seems like he's going to make a lot of money collecting the boss's drops. He notices that there is a dagger and a key. The girl informs him that this is the key. It would be impossible for them to have actually deposited anything into his bank account. Surprisingly, 1,000,000 yen had been deposited. A man approaches him to the underground sewer, an excellent place to level up quickly and earn money. The man accompanying her says that the main objective, initially, one of them was the drap. The super rare item that Boss Endou had starts spinning on his finger as he explains that the item isn't that rare anymore. Since the drap's mug has a 100% affinity with the Hellfire Goat, they are horrified by the way he treats such a hard-to-obtain item. Observing the dagger, he assumes that item was acquired purely by luck. Endou walks towards the rubble, pointing the blade, and sparks begin to fly. Yellow and blue sparks emanate from it. With a simple downward motion, he cuts one of the pieces of debris in half. Both subordinates watch in amazement and wonder what that dagger is. While saying it's not good enough, he begins to use his sub-occupation ability, hoping that the materials are easy to acquire. Although the term underemployment might sound like a minor detail, now clarifies that it's actually the most important aspect. He explains that the soulsmith occupation grants him the ability to use small fragments of souls to create or strengthen objects. This is the only occupation that allows him to reach the endgame. The protagonist activates his Soul Eyes ability. Upon examining the sword, he discovers that it can be awakened with a fragment from the soul of an F-type mage. Observing the girl, he realizes that she is a mage and that there will be no repercussions from extracting the fragment if, telling him that he will need his help. At the end of the break, the worried man comes over and touches No on the shoulder, asking if he feels unwell. They sign a contract. He laments that he wishes he had known that before agreeing to take 90% of her rewards, and he dramatically stabs his dagger into the ground. He says he still has something else he can use, looking at them both intently. He asks if they didn't want that key so they could level up, and they, confused, ask if, all right. He says that in exchange, they will have to give him all the items that are on this list, which will slightly reduce the amount of the fee they will have to pay. They both feel extremely happy and begin to thank him profusely. The protagonist tells them that they don't need to thank him, since after all, the more they earn, the more he will profit, thus fulfilling the conditions for extraction. He has managed to acquire a soul fragment from an EV-type mage. With the materials in hand, Ao activates the soulsmith skill once again. He commands the sword to awaken as it shines radiantly. Fragments swirl within the tornado of power, and the sword gains a purple edge. Raising the dagger before him, he realizes he has acquired a new ability called Soul Slashing. The hero begins to activate the ability to test its power, while his subordinates watch on, terrified. He launches an attack to the front, cutting down everything in its path. The attack was so powerful that it simply tears through the shed, revealing a forest beyond. Both subordinates observe the crater that has been created, impressed by such immense strength. They all stare at the power that was unleashed with a simple wave of the dagger and collapse to the ground. He simply starts running while laughing out loud, leaving his companion on the ground, who is left wondering where he is running off to, filled with hope. The player, wondering if a human could possibly possess such power. Looking at the dagger, he remarks that this seems to be its limit. Turning to the No girl, he comments that he already has a weapon and a minimal amount of skills, but he should take the next step. The protagonist stops directly in front of the girl, quickly frightening her. Roni covers her face, thinking that he is going to kill her, but to her surprise, No simply continues walking, leaving her confused about what is happening. He crouches in front of the bodies of his subordinates' former companions and begins to pray. Rumi watches him, delighted, wondering if No is mourning for the dead players. However, in reality, the protagonist only wanted the wallets of those extras. The little thief starts to smile, saying they had a lot of money. They both conclude that he is more dangerous than the infernal goat. Somewhere, various black feathers fall from the sky all around. From a shrine, several crows fly as someone stands before the gate. It was Nu, observing the location. He calmly approaches a well, descending the stairs. The protagonist narrates that beneath this well lies a large number of monsters. Generally, these would only be challenged by a group of 3 or more people, but No states that doesn't apply to him, since he possesses the goat dagger. Upon reaching the bottom of the stairs, he surveys his surroundings. Suddenly, he hears the sound of a coin rapidly approaching him. He slices it in half, avoiding contact, and assumes a battle stance. They say that whoever manages to complete this game would gain unlimited wealth. But when he finally succeeds and receives more than $1 million in his account, wonders if this is true and if he could earn money from the game, questioning whether the reward, which he couldn't spend in 10,000 years, would be. The player brandishes his dagger, losing his patience. He glares forward, annoyed. Unexpectedly, 3 men appear, inquiring if there is a new visitor. The man with a bloodthirsty look tells the protagonist that this place is his, pointing his sword towards the men and asking them, "Who decided that?" The man responds that whoever arrives first wins, asking if that isn't the rule of the game. One of the men says that they would let him use the place if he pays them a fee. Realizing that these men are like him, No asks what the price would be. The man tells him that he will charge 50,000 yen per hour, since the protagonist would be earning more anyway. He hands the money to the men, who thank him and inform him that Nu has 1 hour starting from that moment. Delving deeper into the dungeons, he enters the wolf cave. Suddenly, the player hears a howl. It's a wolf. White quickly runs toward him. When he realizes it, he is surrounded by dozens of wolves. He says they are diamond wolves, mid-level monsters, that medium level, making it easy to earn money, and that the cave is the only place where a pack appears. He says he could use the soul sword, but it's better to save it for now. In the blink of an eye, all the wolves leap at him. Skillfully, he launches himself into the fray, and, in the blink of an eye, cuts them all down. All of them. He continues killing them, walking through the middle of the pack and decapitating wolves. After finishing them all off, he simply stops his attack, real, which makes him throw himself completely into the game. That game was relentless and merciless, using its players as sacrifices. The Guardian sits among all the corpses to catch his breath, smiling. He says that, as he expected, they didn't leave him much. Unexpectedly, one of the men who he confronted him at the entrance, appearing behind him and preparing to launch an attack. The protagonist, with relative ease, manages to defend himself from his attack. Enemy, wielding his dagger, he launches a surprising counterattack, but the man manages to dodge it. However, the attack strikes the top of the cave, causing a powerful explosion. His enemy, now with a wound on his forehead, acknowledges that it was a close call. The protagonist observes that the man was able to evade his first attack, albeit with some difficulty, which demonstrates his combat experience. The player remarks to the large man that he seems to like this dirty place. After all, he waited for him to defeat the monsters and lower his guard. With a manic grin, his opponent replies that he loves doing that. He concludes that his real objective is to wait for other players to gather equipment, then kill and rob them. The group leader overhears their conversation. Apparently, he realized, smiling knowingly. The protagonist comments that this is a secret spot used by all cheaters, and it would be strange if they were the only ones there. He says that if they wanted to trick him, they should at least plan a fake raid. The player assumes that, in reality, he realized this after seeing their weapons. He notices that the large man is using a type of brass knuckles, the famous rocket fists. It's a risky, delatore, destroyed, defeated users along with their data. In the tower dungeon, the exit was always random, and the best part of this whole risky move, but it greatly increases the user's speed. He also comments on the skinny guy's weapon, which is a sword that cuts through. Vibes are off regarding the ring the leader is wearing. This is definitely a problematic item. The leader apologizes for the misunderstanding and says that he will even compensate him for the trouble. Reaching into his coat, he throws hundreds of coins at the protagonist. U is surprised as the coins fall, but he also becomes very angry inside, thinking that the guy is throwing around 10,000 yen like it's nothing. As the man's ring shines, he claims, his hand slipped and asks the protagonist to pick them up for him. Realizing it's a trap, the protagonist asks if it's really compensatory to make his enemy kneel. He explains that the ring's ability is to create small explosions with the coins and wonders if its enemies are underestimating him as he throws his dagger into the air. And the protagonist declares that they won't be returning alive after hunting someone with a top ranking. As the three of them huddle together in front of him, they ask Endou if he's forgotten that it's 3 against 1. As he prepares his dagger, protagonist retorts that even if they all teamed up, they wouldn't be worth a single yen. The leader, now even angrier, insults him while glaring furiously. The man snaps his fingers, activating his explosion ability, which triggers a huge explosion. The leader then commands his subordinates to cut him limb from limb until he's dead. Exploration was that they felt the same pain as the characters when taking damage, always facing the real fear of death, causing many players to member until he kills him. The large man appears behind him, positioning himself to launch an attack. With some difficulty, the protagonist manages. Dodging his attack, something catches his attention while he's still in the air. It's Skinny, who claimed he wasn't very good at holding back. The protagonist manages to die, stopping his enemy's sword while his partner launches a series of attacks from behind. However, much to everyone's surprise, the player makes a single move, throwing them both away. Looking at the leader, the protagonist says that, apparently, their agreement not to bother him for 50,000 yen has been broken, and that's why he's going to charge them interest. He launches several attacks towards the leader, while smiling and saying he'll pay them back with interest, but with exploding coins from above. We can see that the protagonist is in the middle, raising his dagger, with 2 of his enemies on the ground, and the leader still standing. The long-haired man returns. Activating his explosive coin ability, he runs while dodging the coins. Without wasting any time, Flaco attacks him from above with relative ease. He manages to stop Flaco's attack, which enrages Flaco. However, his fury turns to fear when he sees his sword broken, leaving him no opportunity to understand what is happening, and the protagonist attacks him again. The leader, witnessing this, wonders if the protagonist's dagger is truly a rare item. Meanwhile, Endou fights against the 3 opponents. The leader assumes that this is still within his expectations and that they will not be defeated by quit the game. Earned enough money to cover his expenses through a part-time job. However, in order to play more, someone like him. Quickly, the player tries to avoid the explosions again and becomes enraged to see them throwing money around as if it were nothing. The large guy reappears behind him, attempting to strike. The protagonist manages to evade the attack, while a massive explosion erupts from the impact. The force of the explosion was so immense that even his allies had to shield themselves. The player's blade spirals through the air, as if signaling his defeat. The big guy starts celebrating, proclaiming it was a great challenge, while his friend chides him, saying he needs to learn to control himself. The skinny one, sword in hand, acknowledges that the visitor was truly powerful. The long-haired man crouches to retrieve the dagger, stating that no matter how excellent the weapon is, if its user isn't alive, it's useless. Suddenly, Ao activates his soul restraint skill, chaining both the skinny guy and the big guy, leaving only the leader who is standing. Terrified, both warriors begin screaming in pain as the chains tighten around them. The leader, worried, starts shouting their names as he emerges from within the fog. The player explains that he used his soulsmith skill to inflict unparalleled pain. The leader, enraged, charges at the protagonist, wielding the axe of the goat. Before he can even take his stance, the protagonist stops him with a look. Nu tells him that he is too slow. Extremely angry, the man retorts that he will not lose by any means. He jumps back while unbuttoning his coat, causing several coins to fly into the air. Now convinced, the leader tells him to went into debt by taking out loans from lenders and banks. Now, he had no choice but to wait for the much-promised unlimited goods that never marvel at what's to come. However, now even more irritated, the protagonist activates his soul restriction skill once again. In the blink of an eye, the opponent is completely chained and tries to scream as some of the chains tighten around his neck. The long-haired man doesn't understand why his ability isn't activating. Ao explains that, with such a large difference in their levels, he can nullify the power of the still-chained enemy. The man asks to what difference he is referring, since he is already at level 7. As he tightens his grip further, the player, looking at all 3, tells him that he did a good job for a beginner. Nu tries to figure out what the conditions are to obtain their soul fragments. For the big one, it was to satisfy his hunger. For the skinny one, it was to introduce him to his older sister, and for the leader, it was to make him genuinely afraid. The protagonist, with a malicious look, says that the leader has a condition that he can fulfill it right now. Strangling the leader begins to plead for his life while grabbing his dagger. The player says that he would be the only one harmed if he left him alive. The man, terrified, begins to ask what he is talking about. Endou says he will sell his body parts. After all, there are always people who want to buy them. Once again, our thief says that the interest rate on the 50,000 yen was very high. The skinny guy starts shouting, saying that the protagonist seems to be someone who would actually do something like that. He feels offended, saying that it makes no sense for someone who lives off small jobs like him to have connections in the black market. They could be spent over 10,000 years. Returning to the moment he finally finished the game, they simply congratulate him, saying that his true reward is his. Endou tells him that if they don't like that idea, they should find another way to make money, as they are completely terrified. The leader pleads for his life, tears streaming down his face. The system notifies that Koki deeply fears him, and the conditions have been met, acquiring a soul fragment from a mage. After this, the protagonist simply releases him, the chains falling to the ground as the mage gasps for breath. Again, the protagonist hands them several contracts, asking them to sign. Everyone is outraged by the fact that they will have to give up 90% of their profits and obey absolutely all of his orders. Covered in blood, Endou looks at them, asking if they have any complaints. Terrified, both. They respond that they don't have any. He tells them that with this, the three of them are now his subordinates, and if they ever think of betraying him, the operating table will be. His destiny takes an unexpected turn when he demands they lead him to their true leader. Everyone is utterly terrified, and they ask him how he figured it out. He responds that the items they possess wouldn't be acquired by weaklings like them. Clearly, someone is pulling the strings, and he asks if he's right about that. Koki begins to beg, explaining that if the boss finds out, he will kill them. Placing his foot on his subordinate's head, Endou asks him if he's going to betray his former boss, or if he'd prefer to have his organs transplanted. Trembling, Skinny begins to mutter something inaudible. Suddenly, he bursts into tears and experiences. Exhausted, he begins to remove the VR headset in complete disbelief. He wonders if he really did all of that, and dropping everything, he rushes to his bed, running away, screaming that he wants neither option, which leaves the big guy completely surprised. The player points a finger at the man, questioning if he really thinks he can get away with it. Alma's restraining chains ensnare the man once more. His two companions are extremely scared by the fact that he seems to have complete control, especially while their partner is being suffocated. They offer to lead them to their boss, without. However, Ao still demands all their weapons and money. The protagonist observes that the security in this world is terrible, even worse than in the game. With a smile, O laughs, saying that there is probably no one around who can currently harm him. Looking at his status window, we can see that the protagonist is on a completely different level altogether. As night falls, we see a circus, and like every circus, there's the area where the tightrope walker performs, along with rings of fire and other effects. Then, we see someone being beaten by a man. The person being attacked falls to the ground, while bleeding. Some people in what looks like a cell say that he's next and that they are very sorry. A man with a face covered in blood tells the person being hit that they haven't even completed their task. The man asks if he isn't going to apologize to the boss. Another man in the cell shouts, begging him to stop, saying that if he doesn't, the person will die. With a sadistic smile, he says that the cell phone, anxious for the reward. He clicks on the email sent by the Prophecy Online team. They announce that they had recently reached their goal, and therefore, person just has to die, and that everyone is causing the boss too many problems. Someone holding a whip asks why they are talking about him. He starts stuttering, calling him boss. The boss, with makeup like a clown, asks his subordinate if he has finished disciplining the man on the ground. The boss says that if he had broken a bone, it would take a long time for him to recover. He tells his subordinate that, no matter how incompetent they may be, they shouldn't just break them. Trembling and sweating, the sadist begins to apologize to the boss with tears in his eyes. The man who was being attacked thanks the boss, saying that he will do better next time for sure. However, his gratitude is interrupted when the clown suddenly pulls out his whip. The man is struck in the face with an extremely powerful blow, and the clown continues to whip him, saying that this is the best method because it doesn't break their bones, but instead destroys their flesh. Continuing to assault himself, he claims that not even welfare organizations, Animal would help him if he's so lazy. Then, suddenly, drawing the boss's attention, someone announces that he has returned with a grim expression. The boss comments that they returned too soon. The long-haired man states that they need to file a report because in their current condition, they won't be able to continue the operation. The clown notices his hand and realizes that the ring is missing. He becomes extremely irritated as he glares at Koki. The boss demands to know where the ring is. For this reason, Prophecy Online will be shut down. Nervous, Endou wonders what will happen to his rewards as he reads the game's message of gratitude for the cleaning that he lent him, insisting that it's worth more than his own life. The long-haired man bows deeply, apologizing and explaining that it was stolen by the man, who was practically a monster, tries to explain, but the boss ignores him and simply attacks. Koki falls to the ground, angered by the force of the impact. The boss says that even though his guild doesn't have many members, there's no way he's surrounded by only incompetent scum. Then, both of Koki's colleagues confess that most gave up because of his abuse of power. The boss says that there is only one job Koki is capable of doing, and he calls for his other subordinate, Locke. The clown asks him to bring Johnny. Suddenly, a large white tiger paw appears. The animal heads directly towards the long-haired man and roars, while glaring at him furiously. Gauging in fear, the man begins to beg the boss not to do that, insisting he has been faithful to his orders from the very beginning. With a smile, the clown orders Yo and Sini, the large tiger, to open their mouths towards Koki, who remains paralyzed with fear. Suddenly, someone appears, hanging from one of the circus rigs. It was the protagonist, who saves his new subordinate by kicking the tiger away with his absurd strength, managing to throw the animal far away. Worried about his animal, the boss looks at it while shouting its name. The player, with a smile, apologizes, but says he couldn't let them kill his source of income. The boss runs to his animal, asking if it's okay, saying that it was probably he sleeps happily. However, when he wakes up, he discovers that the world has been invaded by monsters. The game has become reality, and he is the only one who knows. Sponsorship of everyone. Feeling terrible, he ends up dropping his cell phone to the floor, lamenting his situation, as his cell phone lies broken on the ground. Scared. Desperate, Koki asks why Nu took so long to appear, but the scammer only complains that there wasn't much to steal, which is not surprising. The boss attacks him from behind with his whip, but unexpectedly, the protagonist, without even turning around, cuts the whip to pieces in the blink of an eye. The boss was left without his whip as it fell to the ground in several pieces. Now, with a mix of fear and nervousness, the clown asks who he is, or rather, what he's saying, will be the new leader of those men, as his sword glows purple. Annoyed, Locke begins to question where their gratitude towards the boss has gone. The men ask why they should be grateful, since they only obeyed him out of fear, but now the protagonist is even more frightening than he is. The protagonist stares at him intently, asking if he heard him. Then, pointing to the other men who were caged, he tells them that if they sign a contract, he will protect them from him. Weak and battered, the man who had just been assaulted asks if he will be rescued from this hell. With a malicious smile, the protagonist promises that he will. The player announces to everyone that he will only take 50% of their earnings. This angers his other subordinates, as he had been charging them 90%. Annoyed, he retorts that it's because they tried to kill him. Trembling with rage, the clown asks if, on top of injuring his animal, he also intends to steal his subordinates. His eyes glow with a purple light as he vows to kill all 4 of them. He points out that they are in Japan and questions how long such behavior has been tolerated there. Kneeling, or wondering if he will be properly rewarded after finishing the game, the day remains sunny and the neighborhood peaceful, as if his troubles, barbarian, he sneers. Pulling an ID from his inventory, the clown explains that, as long as he possesses this, it signifies that he is the guildmaster and head of the guild. Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. The protagonist is surprised to learn he's a guildmaster. He mentions that the Japanese government gives guild leaders the power to operate above the law and conquer dungeons. Andre says that not even the police can lay a hands on them, and that currently in Japan, those with power face no consequences. With a smile, U asks if that means that upon becoming a guildmaster, one can engage in shady dealings without consequences. The clown calls the protagonist a fool while grabbing a gun, explaining that to become a guildmaster, one must be rank B. While pointing his gun at the protagonist, the guild boss says he's going to die, so he doesn't need to know anything. Moreover, the man starts shooting, saying he'll turn him into a sieve. No simply watches the bullets coming towards him as the protagonist uses his ability. Called Soul Barrier, it's a barrier erected from level 25 onwards using Type E magical soul fragments. As the clown continues shooting, he insults and praises now simultaneously, calling him cunning. The protagonist points out that Russia used nuclear missiles during the ice test and still achieved nothing. He asks the guildmaster if he's ever stopped to consider that. After all, there are many players, but none of them use weapons they won't affect anyone else. As he walks toward his bed, he tries to reassure himself that, because it's a large sum of money, the transfer might just take some time. Endou lies down. Fire. Still shooting, the boss demands that he not get any closer. Suddenly, he receives a massive electric shock, causing him to drop his weapon and the approaching barrier. She finally reaches him and starts pushing him back. He desperately forces himself against the barrier, trying to stop her as she continues to advance on him. The protagonist asks him to take a good look while struggling to hold the barrier. He realizes he's being crushed, completely compressed, against the wall, causing several cracks to appear. The man starts spitting blood as Endou laughs. The former guildmaster then collapses to the ground, powerless. After the protagonist dispels his barrier, he looks at the man and tells him that skills surpass weapons, and that Andre shouldn't think he can defeat him with those toys. The former subordinates begin to murmur that not even their boss could do anything against that man. With a smile, the protagonist asks them if they want to do business with him, and if they accept, he will still allow them to take revenge. Everyone accepts the contract as long as they are able to do whatever they want with the scoundrel who has fallen to the ground. The master asks how he, an unlicensed person, could do this without the authorities taking notice. They would remain still. Endou says he doesn't care. After all, the man himself told him that power is everything. Currently, even with his head lowered, the clown, he notices footsteps approaching. When he raises his head, he realizes that it's all of his subordinates. While the subordinates beat their boss, exhausted in his bed, saying he will check it again the next day. The next day, looking at his cell phone, he admits that he hasn't received anything beyond the den. Player assumes that he really earned a lot of money today and that they will give him even more. Looking at the system window, he thinks it would be best to finish the trial. When people begin to despair, they realize there's only a month left, leading them to conclude that this is the perfect opportunity. At the headquarters of the Players Association is where the rank certification exam takes place. The protagonist goes to take the exam and notices 3 people chatting behind him. One of them says that if you're a top B rank player, you'll have a very high salary, something like tens of millions of yen. His friend tells him not to get his hopes up, since only 1% of the Japanese population is B rank, and there are only 9 A rank players. They continue to argue, while the protagonist simply listens. Mentions that it's been 2 weeks since the game became reality. The government offered a reward of 100 million to who managed to complete the trial, but as expected, the result was disastrous, so now it is mandatory for you to apply to the Association of Players. If you don't participate and don't take the tests, you won't receive any rewards. Therefore, while walking towards the association, the protagonist assumes that there's a lot of money involved and that he wants a piece of it, but someone is watching him from above. He realizes that he is being watched and tries to find the person. Suddenly, an object flies in his direction, but he deflects the attack with ease. The people around him begin to express their surprise, saying that the million yen and that he should have quit while he was ahead. A week passes after these events. He hears a loud noise and wonders what's happening. So, traffic light fell from the sky. It was Taco calling him, saying that he had been lucky. Before leaving, he shouts that the protagonist will not get rid of his debt so easily. The protagonist asks if the loan shark also came to take the exam. He replies that someone so weak that they could be defeated with a single hit from the novice's fist skill should just give up being a player. Convinced, Taco says that he's not the same anymore, and that he now has the strongest class, Launcher. The protagonist starts laughing, saying that class is only for amateurs who don't know what they're doing. The protagonist says that class can't keep up with the power inflation, and the loan shark asks him what class he is, with a lecherous look. Says that his class is Novato. The man laughs, saying that's the same as not having a class at all. The player thinks to himself that his real main class is Rookie, but he doesn't need me to tell him about high school, as he lifts the traffic sign again. Taco says he'll get revenge for what happened the other day, and that it's the true power of a pitcher. He starts launching multiple attacks at the protagonist, who simply dodges them all while closing the distance. The man, frightened, asks how he's able to do that. Standing before the loan shark, Endou says he really didn't want any trouble before the exam, but he can't just stand by when trouble comes looking for him. With a simple flick of his arm, he sends the man flying upwards, causing panic among the onlookers. Early in the morning, looking at his cell phone, Endou realizes that the sound isn't coming from it. It's then that he looks up and sees a system window in front of him. There are notifications. The loan shark screams desperately as he crashes to the ground. Everyone stares as the protagonist continues walking, saying it was self-defense. From an extremely luxurious establishment, he receives service and learns that the registration fee is 8,000 yen, which he considers extremely expensive. Sometime later, he sat dejected about losing 8,000 yen, when suddenly, someone approached him. It was a girl apologizing for the delay with a smile. She says that her ranking certification exam will now begin. He stood before a large, black rock. This rock emanated a strong purple light. Oh, he notices that the exam is apparently as he had been told, and asks the girl if he should place his hand on it. He begins to extend his hand towards the large rock. As he brings his hand closer to the rock, several rays of light interconnect. He moves his hand even closer as a blue light emanates upon touching the rock, causing a large explosion of light, and even panicking the assistant. There were multiple rays of light along with a single, powerful light. Extremely strong light emanated from the stone. Still frightened by what she sees, the woman begins to wonder what it is. Elsewhere, the girl, still surprised, calls out his name. She says the results are in and that he's equivalent to rank A. She receives a document informing her of his classification. A little nervous, she says that he probably already knows this, but players can change classes. She begins to explain that he could be a master. Saying that the ice trial had failed and Moscow had been destroyed, the next trial would be the Earth trial, with a time limit of 43 days. Swordsman, a master magician, or an archbishop. He declines, saying that even if he wanted to, his class isn't available yet. Confused, the girl asks what class it is, but the protagonist replies that he has no intention of revealing it. She informs him that in order to change classes, he will have to use a special item, and then asks if he would like assistance from the association. No simply rejects the offer coldly. He then asks if that is all she has to say. The woman, slightly nervous, inquires if this wouldn't be problematic for him. The player asks her why she is asking that. She explains that he possesses more power than any A rank they have ever seen, but because he doesn't have a class, he will be demoted to rank E. The girl informs him that rank E has many restrictions, such as not being able to create his own guild, which would be a significant disadvantage for him. He comments that the government loves to create useless rules, all the while thinking that only he needs to raise a subordinate to rank B. Remember, only one class can complete this game, and he has no intention of changing his class. Until they arrive, the protagonist asks if even rank E individuals can receive the 100 million reward for clearing the exam. She replies, yes. The woman says she understands, and that his registration will have to be issued with a rank E classification. Shortly after, he was walking down the street, while some people were holding up signs. They were guild members, trying to recruit people who had just completed the exam. The protagonist, with a smile, in the event of failure, the trial location would be annihilated. Now, Sho looks at everything in confusion, not understanding what is happening on TV. Notices that people are really putting a lot of effort into this recruitment. Two girls say they are looking for rank D players and ask him if he either declines to join their guild or tells them that he is an E rank, and the girls begin lamenting his situation, saying they understand. The protagonist notices that E rank players are treated like cockroaches, but he convinces himself that he doesn't care about any of it. Suddenly, his attention is caught by a man in a suit walking through the crowd. The man had an orange aura surrounding his body, and his eyes were glowing orange as well. While he was staring at him, the man approached and said it was a pleasure to meet him, asking if his name was Endou. Ray suddenly extends a card to Nu, saying that it contains his information. It was the card of a guild called Wings of Genesis. People begin discussing amongst themselves, wondering if that really is the strongest guild, Genesis, and he is Fedor. The protagonist asks what the name Fedor means, and the man, looking somewhat uncomfortable, explains that it was his nickname in the game. The player notices that he is famous and wonders if he should befriend him since he could make some money. He then asks Shinji what he wants with him, but their conversation is interrupted by the loan shark, who asks if Fedor was looking for him. Tako approaches, saying that even if he is a rank B player, he won't be swayed by bad decisions. The protagonist wonders if that weak-looking guy really is a rank B, and assumes. Terrified journalists inform the population about the current state of Moscow, as monsters completely devastate the city. The Russian government, that maybe he threatened the examiner. Shinji asks who he is, and the loan shark angrily calls him a sissy. Tako gets furious and grabs the man by grabbing his tie, threatening him and saying that he's strong. However, with a single movement, the man easily twists his arm, bringing him to his knees, while Fristerius, the loan shark, complains of the pain, Now a little more serious. Fedor says that every minute they are getting closer to destruction, and therefore, he doesn't have time for him. Tako retreats, angry, while telling Shinji that he shouldn't cry if he tries to recruit him later. The man apologizes to the protagonist for the commotion, but Do says that it's okay, since Tako was also an inconvenience for him. The protagonist asks him what he wants, since someone like him wouldn't have anything to do with, say, to an E rank. The man just laughs and calls him humble. Fedor explains that the only reason he is rank E is because he refused to change his class. Laughing, the protagonist remarks that the association is apparently too talkative. Looking somewhat uncomfortable, the man says that, with the end of Japan approaching, they can't afford to be careless. Shinji asks the protagonist what he thinks about working with them, offering him the same amount they paid for the information. Upon seeing the check, Endou is shocked to see that it's for 10 million yen. He thinks to himself that it's an amount he possessed some time ago, while internally screaming that he wants that money. The player returns the check, stating that he doesn't want to join any guild. Singi comments that truly declares that there is no hope for survivors, as they don't know what kind of creatures these are. The journalists announce that they appear to be dragons. Strong people don't really desire that kind of thing. Fedor then makes another proposal, asking if he might be interested in the information they possess. He says that his guild is backed by government agencies and even other guilds around the world. Looking at him, the protagonist asks if they could find out who the player was that completed the online prophecy. Smiling, Shinji replies that it's impossible, since no one has ever completed that game. The protagonist, extremely irritated, says that in that case, he'll have to reject the offer. The man gets very scared seeing his reaction. He says that, okay, handing him a sheet of paper that says he can contact him if he changes his mind. As he leaves the place, the man wonders why Nu gave up so easily. He wonders if No was worried about tarnishing his guild's name by insisting too much, but comes to the conclusion that that's not the reason. Shinji confesses that he was terrified, as if every part of his body was warning him not to get into trouble with that monster, which made Fedor. He almost soiled himself. The protagonist touches his shoulder, and Endou hands him a piece of paper, leaving the man even more confused. He tells him that, if he ever needs help, he can call the number on the paper, and depending on the value of the request, he might accept it. Taking the paper, while still very nervous, the man expresses his gratitude for the kindness. Still stunned, Shinji wonders who he really is. Later, at the Wings of Genesis Guild headquarters, someone is walking hurriedly through the hallway. On the rooftop, Fedor enters all the details, allowing him to outsmart the system. The story begins on a beautiful morning with clear skies. Someone was wearing a virtual helicopter observed the monsters from above. The journalist on board reports that a similar situation is about to occur in Japan. Guildmaster's office, and formally announces that he has returned. Suddenly, the master turns around, revealing herself to be a woman. He asks what it was like meeting the association's strongest rookie. Still a bit on edge, Shinji replies that he really is a monster. Trembling, he admits that the protagonist was the only player who made him feel fear, with just a simple conversation and a terrifying gaze. The Guildmaster asks who is stronger, her or Endou. He stammers, hesitant to answer. She says she'll take his silence as an answer. While looking over the protagonist's file, and still very nervous, Shinji says that he's very sorry. Tsukino tells him that he doesn't need to apologize, since his job is to convey all the information without hiding anything. The Guildmaster mentions that out of the 10 Transcendents, she is undoubtedly the lowest level 1. That's why it's not surprising that there are people stronger than her. He explains that the 10 Transcendents are the top players in the online prophecy beta test, those who received a monetary reward. Tsukino also reports that in a world where a game has become reality, the emergence of someone powerful alters the power hierarchy. He observes that because Zingy has returned alone, it signifies that the negotiation fell through. He says that, apparently, the protagonist isn't interested in the information they possess, let alone the 10 million offered. With her hands crossed, she says that if Endou, according to the information gathered, the woman mentions that many are saying it's a disaster originating from a game called Online Prophecy, being completely anno. Really is one of the 10 Transcendents. Fame and money are only a matter of time for him. She notes that it's impossible for one of the 10 Transcendents to remain voluntarily as a rookie. Tsukino comments that, conversely, there are hidden items that are extremely powerful, but they also come with side effects. Secondary. She says that, in any case, Fedor should continue to evaluate the man with his own eyes, and if his assessments are correct, then certainly, he will become the strongest in the world. The teacher says that, in any event, the strongest person in the world could only be one of the top 10. transcendents whose names are unknown. Nervous, Shinji asks if she's talking about the person in first place. He reports that even the United States sought the data of the top 10. However, the data for number 1 was corrupted. Susukino hypothesizes that the United States is lying about they have data on number 1 and are secretly hiding him in their country. Shinji says she also believed the rumors, but after seeing Nu in person, remembering the protagonist, Fedor says that it is highly likely that he really is number 1. The teacher says that if he's saying that, then there's a high probability that they are correct. Looking out her window, she says that Shinji must inform all the members that it is strictly prohibited to take any hostile actions against Nu. She mentioned that a nuclear bomb, whose explosion's timing is unknown, must be handled with extreme similar. A geologist asserts that the only plausible cause for a disaster of this magnitude would be the movement of continental plates, not monsters. While Care, still very nervous, he says he will do exactly as he was asked. On the other side of the city, in another large building, Endou reports that some weeks, and they were scouting locations to use as hideouts for their income source. He was admiring the view when suddenly, someone called out to him. There, his subordinates were setting up the television and asking for his input. Koki presents him with a suitcase full of money, explaining that he collected the tributes from today. The protagonist praises him and inquires about the attack group's preparation progress. Koki replies that they are leveling up with ease in the underground sewers and earning 1,000,000 yen per day. Excited, he informs him that even the newly recruited members are earning 100,000 yen per day. Overjoyed, the long-haired man says he never imagined earning so much money and thanks the protagonist. The player reminds him that he told him that he would make them money in the end, because if they win, he wins too. He mentions that tributes are practically fees. He informs her, and Koki mentally thinks that paying 90% is really a lot, but without the information, they wouldn't even get 10%. Looking at the protagonist, he observes that this man has very valuable information. The one with long hair asks what they will do about the trial, since there are only 10 days left, and the value of the reward is already at 400 million. The protagonist tells him that he is going to wait a little longer. Suddenly, Ao is called over by the television, which is reporting something. A monster opens its mouth in the direction of the helicopter. The journalist inquires if it's trying to target someone. Someone screams desperately, begging them to get out. Showed the location where the trial was being carried out, reporting that if they fail to complete it in 10 days, Japan will be destroyed. Another presenter says that, just like at the beginning, the situation seems hopeless. His colleague mentions they have new information and announces that the Japanese government has declared that will pay 1 trillion yen to whoever manages to complete the test. Looking at the announcement, the player says that if they delay any longer, perhaps some foreign guilds will try to do it. Picking up a piece of clothing, he says that now is the best time, and gets dressed, saying he's going out for a bit. Meanwhile, the one with long hair asks if he's going alone. No responds that, of course he is. After all, he can't jeopardize his source of income. Everyone is surprised by him. However, number 171 gets angry and says that there's 1 trillion yen at stake, and that's why he's going to keep it all for himself. Koki snaps back to reality, realizing that it's all about the money. It was already night. When he finally arrived at the test site, there was a large crowd gathered in front of the entrance. The protagonist approached as Shinji noticed his presence. I noticed his presence. The player, as always, remained calm, as if he were happily heading to the market. Fedor, passing by him, asks if he really came. Next to him, Endou states that he has no intention of cooperating. However, Shinji replies that it's a shame, since he wanted to do a lucrative business deal with him. He informs him that it would only involve transporting some items for 100 million, causing the protagonist to give him his full attention. Shinji leads him to a space, from there and go back, but unfortunately, there is no response. The presenter, terrified, starts shouting the journalist's name, asking if she can, where there were hundreds of backpacks. He tells him that he would like the protagonist to carry one of those backpacks to his members who are inside the test area. Curious, Endou asks what's inside that makes them worth 100 million. Shinji replies that it's provisions. Upon opening one of the backpacks, he realizes that they are full of provisions. He asks what it is, and Fedor tells him that they are his guildmaster's favorite foods. Shinji explains that they are in the deepest layer of the trial, and that's why they are running out of supplies. With a smile, the protagonist asks what the problem is, since with that amount of money, many people would accept something uncomfortable. He says that they are actually in a difficult situation, Shinji reports that he already requested this from 39 groups, but all of them were completely annihilated. The player begins to say that in the first 4 layers, there should only be formalities and wonders if it's different from the game. Still very nervous, the man concludes that he's certain Shinji knew something. He says that, as far as they know, things are the same as in the game, but most people don't make it to the 5th layer. Everyone who manages to reach the 5th layer is there waiting for supplies. He continues, saying that the only people who can treat the 4th layer as a mere formality are Ao and his guild master. Guild. While taking the backpack, the protagonist asks if they're really that short-handed, but he's making money regardless. Looking at, hear him. The specialist, horrified by the scene, says that this could never be caused by plate tectonics, and runs towards his balcony. Fedor. He asks if he would earn a reward for delivering it quickly. As Fedor takes out his cell phone, he says he will talk to his superiors. Looking at, a man is talking on the phone. Endou wonders how much money he could make with them. He informs the player that if he delivers within a day, they would add 50 millions more. Suddenly, Shinji hears a noise. It was the protagonist turning around quickly, saying he would arrive in an hour. Inside the test, in the 3rd, under the cover, some people were facing a giant insect. The man was trying to withstand the monster's attacks as he was pushed towards. Down below, still holding the monster, he tells the woman to run, even if she has to go alone. She calls to him, begging him to have her husband come with her. Her husband, smiling, watches. She's behind him, thanking him for everything and asking him to leave. She calls out his name as she reaches out to grab him. Unexpectedly, the protagonist cuts the entire insect, saying it's in his way. The man falls to the ground in terror as the pieces of the giant monster collapse around him. Still in shock, he can't comprehend how he is still alive, while his wife thanks No for saving him. But in the blink of an eye, the player is already extremely far away, leaving the two of them behind, not understanding what just happened. While the protagonist walks through the cave at an incredible speed, they wonder if he's already gone. He finally arrives at the 5th level, stopping his sprint, now realizes that it didn't. The protagonist states that there is no doubt about it, confessing that even in this crazy situation, he managed to remain calm. With this extreme calm, only one take him even an hour, and concludes that the 150 million will be very lucrative. But suddenly, he is confused when he notices something. It was a man asking him if he was Endou. Placing the backpack on the ground, the protagonist asks if the man is from the Genesis Handles, to which he confirms and tells him that he brought the provisions that Shinji requested him to deliver. The man informs him that the agreed amount was deposited into his account as soon as he departed, because Fedor assured them that he would make the delivery. Opening his banking app, he realizes that 150 million was indeed transferred to him. Satisfied, he simply thanks them for the business. Just as several players appear, their leader announces that they had been waiting for food for a long time. They begin to distribute the provisions, saying that they are finally safe, while one of them says he will notify the front lines. The protagonist remarks that it sounds horrible, while the leader responds affirmatively. It informs the player that they have already lost a significant number of people. Unexpectedly, many people begin running and shout that they will be caught. Approaching the camp, they say they are now safe, and the leader asks what happened, but before they can answer, a loud noise echoes through the cave, causing pain to everyone. They look ahead and see a large cloud of smoke billowing out. To everyone's surprise, a massive swarm of giant insects is heading in their direction. The protagonist was preparing to attack when, suddenly, a large flame shoots past him, leaving him completely stunned. The one thing came to his mind. Elsewhere, a woman was attempting to learn how the system works by pressing the main event button, and she also presses. Guildmaster rushes past him, incinerating all the insects. After destroying them all, she stops, her sword still wreathed in flames. The insects' bodies fall, completely charred. He realizes that this is a high-level secret skill, swordsmanship, Elemental Hellfire. The woman approaches him, saying it's a pleasure to meet him, and thanks Endou for accepting the mission of transport, while placing his sword back in its scabbard. She introduces herself as the Guildmaster. Don't forget to leave a like, so I can continue bringing you the next part of this work. What did you think of this story? Personally, I loved it. Sending a hug. Until the next work, everyone. That button. Noting that the time limit was 43 days and the testing location was Japan with 0 progress. She remembers the message from the game that said that her experience would be invaluable. The protagonist assumes that the praiseworthy goods mentioned by the game would be his experiences. After all, he was reality headset, while breathing heavily and sweating profusely. Within the game, he received congratulations for passing the final test, being the only one who managed to finish it. Suddenly, after a long time, his door opens. Looking all elegant, the guy confidently exits with a conman's smile. He says now he'll earn his money while running. He mentions that, with the game becoming reality, there will be fierce competition for positions and points. Experience. Still moving quickly, he notices the nearest dungeon is directly in front of him, so he rushes toward a large building. Many people are running and despairing, wondering how they can escape. As the buses and trains are out of service, anxious and hurried, he continues to run. Unexpectedly, someone angrily shouts at him to stop. The man plants himself in front of him, surprising the protagonist. He asks Endou if he's going to, that he was on his way home when he was ordered to turn around immediately. A cigarette was then thrown in his face. A year prior, the protagonist was in a dungeon when an advertisement popped up. It was a company offering 200,000 yen interest-free to anyone who passed their selection process, but in exchange, they wanted 50% of all rewards. No comments that it's a good deal, since he'll take the interest-free money and only pay upon finishing the game. However, after spending the 200,000 yen, he was informed that he hadn't passed the selection and therefore would have to pay 50% interest within 10 days. Remembering an the only one to manage to finish the game is happy and asks if it's really all over. While a pixelated game appears and someone mentions something about a game, occasion when he had a gun pointed at him, he started taking out loans from banks to pay off the debts, but when he tried to repay them, he was brushed aside. Waiting for the interest to accrue, the man smiles and asks if the protagonist has the money to repay the loan. Annoyed, Nu glares at the lender and asks how he is supposed to pay if they don't help him out. The man questions if that's true, adding that people always come up with excuses when they don't want to pay. Excuses. Calling him despicable while still smiling, the lender says that luckily, he is there on other business. He asks Endou if he wasn't playing that game called Prophecy Online. The man comments that the current state of the world is identical to that of the game. Grabbing Nu by the collar, he asks if he knows any information, and that, if he knows anything, he should tell him everything. The protagonist orders the man to take his filthy hands off of him. Becoming even angrier, he asks Endou, "Who do you think you're talking to?" Then, the protagonist tells Taco that he will give him some useful information and activates his rookie fist skill. Doing. The lender backs down. Taco increases the power of his fists by 50% and begins to punch the man repeatedly. The force of his attacks was so great that the lender was thrown against a traffic sign. Looking at the man lying on the ground, he says that from now on, he is the one in charge, while observing Taco. Fainted and bleeding. No comments that, apparently, the lender can't hear him. He simply leaves Taco there and runs back towards his objective. Staffa reports that this was the name of the VR game, Prophecy Online, which truly was an impressive and immersive virtual reality experience. Looking out from inside a car, a man in a black hoodie comments that perhaps these are the abilities from the game. His face partially covered says he didn't expect to encounter such an experienced person so quickly. Smiling, the man remarks that law and order will soon collapse, making the protagonist arrives at a place called the Sanctuary of the Goat. Unexpectedly, something catches his attention. Upon seeing a car, he wonders if someone has arrived before him. Endou begins to descend into the deep, dark dungeon, continuing through the corridors as he searches for something. Suddenly, he perceives a strong smell of blood. Surprisingly, in front of him are dozens of dead lizardmen. The same hooded man, along with his group, notices that, apparently, another person has arrived. Looking at No, the man asks if the protagonist was also a player of Prophecy. Somewhat irritated, No, he asks if that group was responsible for everything. The hooded man replies that those were high-level monsters, and if it weren't for him, the protagonist would already be dead. No begins to question whether the lizards are actually high-level, remembering that his level was the lowest of them all. Removing the hood, the man comments that No apparently has no friends, and asks if he would like to become one of his subordinates. He tells him that the protagonist will have to hand over half of everything he obtains, but in exchange, he will protect him, since he is very strong. Everyone behind him seems, and action-packed, supporting resolutions of up to 16 Kelvin. It was an open-world online RPG, where players could feel, smell, and hear, delighted by his kindness. Endou apologizes, saying he prefers to continue alone, then points ahead and asks if they will be able to get past the boss. They were stunned just thinking about it. Speaking with his group, the hooded man asks if it's worth killing Endou after taking down the boss, making everyone nervous. The man states that the fewer people who know the game's information, the better. He declares that this is his decision, and anyone who disagrees will meet with an accidental death. Suddenly, everyone feels a sense of fear and nervousness. The man informs his subordinates that the boss of that place is the goat of the Dam, Embers, so he doesn't want the protagonist to be the last one to attack it. There were only 5 minutes left until the gate opened. Some of them approach Nu, who is surprised by their sudden appearance. The girl, along with 2 other men, walks towards him, looking a little nervous and smiling. He asks if they are going to try something. Stop him. A little nervous, they start telling him that he's right and that he should just stay put. He mentally figures he could just toss them outside, but he'll let them go this time. The door opens as the protagonist thinks that it won't be too late, and he'll defeat the boss after. Most of them have died. After the time to open the door expires, it finally opens. No simply pulls a juice box from his inventory and leans against the wall, waiting for his chance. Hearing the gates closing, he looks toward the boss room, wondering how far. Things. That was Prophecy Online. The game promised that anyone who managed to finish it would obtain unlimited goods that couldn't be spent even in 10,000. They'll be able to get. As they enter, the leader remarks that it was convenient Nu didn't go with them. The girl mentions that perhaps the protagonist gave up. He realizes their intentions to kill him, but the leader retorts that he isn't intelligent enough to even notice. Standing before them is a large, completely empty warehouse, with only a single ray of light entering through a crack in the ceiling, striking the shield of one of his subordinates. The leader orders him to do his job. The man replies that, with his shield, the boss won't have any problems, calling the leader Lord Light. A candle emitting violet flames was placed in a chandelier on the wall. Suddenly, a strong wind blasts through, leaving them all bewildered. Surprisingly, a massive tornado of fire manifests in front of them. The leader, terrified, begins to question what kind of situation this is. Interrupting his thoughts, an enormous paw emerges from the flames. Then, when he realizes that it's the Hellfire goat, he sees the monster is a mix of a goat, wolf, horse, and other animals. The goat emits a huge scream, causing a shockwave and fire to spread everywhere. Many warriors scream as another devastating attack hits them. Light himself, along with some of his subordinates, is thrown against the front gate. He curses, wondering how everything ended up like this, with the monster standing in front of him. A scared girl asks what they should do now. Enraged, he orders her to shut up and commands everyone to retreat. One of his subordinates shouts,